Bismillah, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Continuing, inshallah, with the book Tayseer al-Fiqh. We're going to resume from Shurut al-Salah, the conditions or the prerequisites of the prayer. And it's commonly started with that they define the word shart. What does condition actually mean technically? So, in the technical terms, they say, ما يلزم من عدمه العدم ولا يلزم من وجوده الوجود. What by its absence it necessitates the actual absence of the essence of the thing that it's a condition for. So if it's missing, it necessitates the missing of the original thing that it's a prerequisite for. And it doesn't necessitate of its existence or its presence that the actual thing it's a prerequisite for be valid or be existent entirely. Because there can be something else there, a different external factor. This is what they refer to as the word shurut. Has it been used? And can we say this is a wording that it's a legislative term? The Sahabas used it, or it comes in the Quran and the Sunnah. Can we use this wording shurut al-salah? Yes, it comes attributed to Umar ibn Khattab, and more than one Imam ascribes it to Umar al-Khattab, with the wording as-salatu laha waqtun sharatahu Allah or sharatahu Allah laha la tasihhu illa bihi. So salat has a condition Allah has placed for it, that its time enter, the prayer will not be valid except with it. So Umar al-Khattab, look at his vocabulary. He used the word shart for the entry of the prayer, the timing. So this is where we get some of the wordings. It is used. And a person may ask, what are the key differences between rukn and shart? And a lot of the scholars, they speak about this. They mention a shart stands out in difference from the rukn and the wajib from two angles. A shart, the first thing it differs with conditions with the pillars and wajibat. They mention that a shart هو الذي يتقدم قبل الصلاة. It is what occurs outside of the salat, before it. And the second difference, وَيَجِبْ إِسْتِمْرَارُهُ وَمُلَازَمَتُهُ لَهَا. And it requires to continue throughout the prayer. So that's the difference. These are two outstanding differences. Like a rukn, they mention it's داخل الشيء. It's within, it's a component of the salat. It's not external, it's internal. Also, the rukn, تنتهي شيئا فشيئا. It ends gradually, depending on whatever is occurring. So maybe the rukn of reciting Fatiha, once you're done reciting, is no longer required. So it's not needed until the taslim, recitation. But in contrast, the shurut is needed throughout. You need it from the beginning to the end. They give example. Facing the Qibla. You need that prior to the salat, qabla salat, and throughout the salat. You have to be facing the qibla externally, and then until all the way to the salams. Wudu, from the conditions of the salat that you need outside of the prayer, before entering the prayer, and you have to have it throughout the prayer. These two key differences we found as a difference between the rest of the wordings of arkan and wajibat. And this benefit is from Al-Bassam and the Sharh al-Bulugh al-Maram. He says, تستمر الشروط حتى نهاية الصلاة. The conditions, prerequisite of the prayer, it continues until the end of the salat. وبهذا فارقت الأركان التي تنتهي شيئا فشيئا. And he said this is how it differs with arkan. Also, some of the scholars, they have a tendency at this chapter to divide shurut al-salat to two categories. They say shurut al-salat تنقسم إلى شروط صحة وشروط وجوب. There's prerequisites that are for validity of the prayer being valid, or the second one, the conditions to show if it's wajib. And these prerequisites, that if they're found, it means it's wajib upon you salat. So they divide it in those two categories. We're going to see examples of that. طيب, how much shurut of salat are there? The most some have got to in different madhabs, أوصل بعضهم إلى 15 شرطا. The most that some have got to is saying that it reached to 15 conditions. Like Ibn Hajar al-Haytami in his book Al-Minhaj al-Qawim, he mentioned about 15. The least some have mentioned were 4. They said just there's only 4 prerequisites, only 4 shurut. That's easy to remember. And the standard, what people mention, is 9, especially in the madhab of Imam Ahmad. And there are some who say the other numbers, 5, 5, 6, 6, and there's some who say even 8. And each madhab adds certain conditions that perhaps the other doesn't mention. Like some of them said, from the conditions of the salat, عدم الكلام, not speaking. وترك الأفعال, and not making any action unless it comes that you're allowed to do that action in the prayer. والإمساك عن المفطر, and refraining from anything that could cause a person to break his state of being in a salat mode. And there are some who even mention certain shurut that they stand it alone with. Like Ibn Hazm, he said from the shurut al-salat, hudur salatul jama'ah, attending it in congregation. If you don't attend it in congregation, your prayer is not valid, he says. And Ibn Taymiyyah even inclines to that opinion, that it's praying alone not valid to them, without a valid reason. But that's an opinion, but it's not the strongest. And we're going to show, inshallah, one by one, the different wordings and the different statements. So the author, he says, شروط الصلاة النية. He starts off with a niyyah. which is not by consensus, and it's not all of them unanimously make it a condition. Some of them you refer to it different words. They all agree that it's required, but the actual wording they refer to it is they differ. And they say niyyah, it is niyatu at-ta'yin, ta'yinul ibadah. What do they mean by niyyah here? Being sincere? No, they don't intend that. They intend more so specifying the act of worship with your heart. And the premise of this is that إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, really actions are based upon the intention. So they say النية محلها القلب, its place is the heart. Sheikh Mubba says اتجاهك للصلاة يعتبر نية. And you just directing yourself to salat and preparing for it is enough as an intention. So what we hear a lot with the jurists, they say you have to do ta'yin niyah. You have to specify a specific intention at the moment of engaging into the ibadah. That's not correct. Just having an intention that drives from you to do certain acts, and if a person were to ask you, what are you doing? And you would respond, that is enough. That is enough. And do you need it from the beginning of the salat? Like what about a person, he is praying Qiyam al-Layl and then he realized within the salat that he didn't pray Isha. Could he change his intention in the middle of the salat and make it for Isha? The majority of the ulama, they refuse. Because they say niyyah is a shart that's required outside of the prayer. Qabla salah, before the prayer. And there's some ulama, like Sheikh Mubin, say yes. فَلَا بَأْسْ أَن تُحَوِّلَهَا إِلَى الْعِشَاء. There's no harm of changing your intention. After you made takbir, Allahu Akbar, to change it for Isha. So you're changing it within the salat, after saying Allahu Akbar, not before. But are you allowed to change it to the point that you prayed one rak'ah with the intention of voluntary Qiyam al-Layl, and then the rest you want to intend now Isha? No, that wouldn't be allowed. Why? Because you would have been praying Isha, how many? 3 rak'ah. You're probably missing some rak'ah, and 1 rak'ah would be voluntary. It's like fasting. Are you allowed to say in the middle of the day, it's close to Dhuhr, okay, I'm going to intend, for example, Sitta Shawwal, the 6 days of Shawwal. I wasn't fasting the whole morning with intention, but I'm going to make my intention now, because voluntary fast, you can make it right before Dhuhr. We say, no, you can't do that, because it says fasting 6 days, and you just fasted half a day. Your intention started from where? Half a day. So you wouldn't be considered having a specific intention for 6 days of the Shawwal, because it has to start from the beginning of the day. That's for just voluntary prayer, where you don't need an intention for a specific amount. You can get rewarded for fasting half of the day. Who's going to prevent you? Say, khalas, right at 11, I want to fast now. No problem. You can get half of the day. There's no preventative. But whatever is required a full day for, you need it from the beginning. So Sheikh Mumbel's fatwa is that if you're going to do it at the beginning, while there's still enough time to get 4 rak'ah, for example, for Isha, you can do that. You don't have to have the intention, like some of them say, because there's 2 extremes. There's tarafan wa wasat. Like the Hanafis, they say you can say Allah Akbar from home, and then when you arrive to the masjid, then you enter the salat. Yani they say there can be a huge gap between your intention and the takbir. And there's some who say it has to be simultaneously together. The correct opinion that your intention could even come after the takbir, after entering the salat. Hope that's clear, inshallah. Like he also gives another example. Whoever intends to pray 4 rak'ah and then he remembers within the salat that he's a traveler and he wants to change it to praying 2 rak'ah, he can do that within the salat. And even the opposite, within the salat, he can do that. The niyyah is a powerful thing, brothers. إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّةِ. What's the thing that justify? Actions are based upon intentions. There's nothing that can come and restrict it. I hope that's clear now about the topic of niyyah. The next one is Islam. Islam, we find some scholars, they added with the shurut al-salah. And some scholars, they say, because there's 3 opinions, if a non-Muslim prays, is that enough for him to enter Islam? And you find him, he joins the salat. The Hanbali madhab, they say, إذا صلى الكافر حكم بإسلامه. Ibn Qudama quotes this in his Mughni, and this is the Hanbali opinion. If a kafir prays, it's taken as is Islam. And also Shaykh Islam ibn Taymiyyah said, anything, if a kafir does that's min khasa'is al-Islam, يحكم له الإسلام حكما. It's given to him the ruling as a Muslim. And the proof they use is the hadith, من استقبل قبلتنا وأكل ذبيحتنا. And the hadith says, whoever faces our qibla and eat what we slaughter, فذلك المسلم, that's a Muslim. So then they're saying this person, he's facing our qibla, he's doing our specific acts, so this person is a Muslim. And even if he was praying, he was leading the salat, for suppose he was a kafir, they said, you're allowed to pray behind him. Taking the appearance, so this guy's a Muslim, he's praying. That's their opinion. The Hanafis, they say, no, he has to, it could only be considered an form of him embracing Islam if he does it publicly, if he's praying congregation. But if he's doing it secretly, they said it's not enough. He tells you, yeah, I pray. We're like, okay, but he still needs to come do shahada. You have to do it either in congregation. We have to all see it. You praying in front of us. And some even add, no, we need to make sure he pronounced the tashahhud when he got to the tahiyyat. Some of them said that. This is added as a prerequisite, mashallah. Let's mention a third opinion. A third opinion, the Shafi'is, they say, no, this is not enough. This is not enough of him just praying the prayer. The fatwa of our Shaykh Yahya ibn al-Hajuri in Yemen, he used to say that if a kafir prays, he becomes a Muslim. And taking the opinion of Shaykh Islam ibn Taymiyyah. And there's some scholars who say, no, he has to utter the shahada. It's not enough for him to just pray. And they bring some evidence, and which is quite strong. They bring a hadith, Anas, that comes to some of the same wordings of that same hadith. Bukhari, أمرت أن أقاتل الناس حتى يقولوا لا إله إلا الله فإذا قالوها وصلوا صلاتنا واستقبلوا قبلتنا وذبحوا ذبيحتنا فقد حرمت علينا دماؤهم وأموالهم إلا بحقها وحسابهم على الله. The hadith is clear, brothers. The Prophet said, I've been waged upon me to wage war upon the people until they say La ilaha illallah. And once they say it, and they pray our prayer, and face our qibla, and slaughter our slaughter, then it becomes for them the rulings of the sanctuaries of a Muslim. So they say the hadith is not general. So it's safer for him to say La ilaha illallah, even that. And because Sheikh Fawzan says a person could pray muhaka, just copying the people. You find a guy sitting at the back and then he just, he wants to copy the movement. He hasn't really embraced Islam. So that's safer. And some give a distinguishment if it's in a land of war or a land of non-war. Some give a distinguishment of that. طيب, moving on. Time is limited. Almost time. Al-aql, sanity. So aql, it is from the shurut. And they mention because the reason he cannot intend the prayer. The person who's, for example, insane, he cannot intend. He just has mere harakat. Even if he's praying, he's not actually intending. He's missing on the prerequisites. طيب, does he have to make up for the prayer? They say he doesn't have to make up for the prayer, even if he's like, it comes to him on and off. As long as the time for that prayer has already elapsed. But if it's still during that time period, he should pray it. What about a person who goes in a coma or becomes unconscious? The scholars, they differed. Man ughmi alayh. And then he was told the time of the prayer, and you were unconscious, for example, 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Some scholars say you have to make up for it, all those 3 prayers, 3 days of prayer. And they use a narration that Ammar bin Yasir, he was one time in a state where he passed out, or he was unconscious for 3 days. And when he woke up, he made up of 3 days of prayers. And some scholars, they use other narration of different Sahabas that indicate, no, you only make up for that time of the prayer that you wake up for. The reason why they're differing, they're trying to see, do we connect this to a person that's insane? Or like he takes his ruling that he has no sanity? Or do we connect him to a person that's sleeping? Whose ruling is he closer to? They say it's taking closer. Some people say he's closer to a person who's sleeping. But they say if you try to wake him up, he won't wake up. So they said you cannot make qiyas here. You can't compare the two. So yes, stronger opinion, he doesn't have to make it up. And what else? Sometimes people are out for like a month or something, unconscious. You're going to tell him after he comes out of that coma, he has to make up all the salat? That's not correct. But they say if someone did something that he wasn't supposed to do, and as a result he became unconscious, or he took a certain drug, some scholars say he has to make up because he had no legitimate reason. Moving on, tamyiz, discernment. Discernment it varies from one age to another. And there was a Sahabi, Umar ibn Abi Salama, where it says in some of the wordings he was 6 or 7. And they needed someone to lead the salat. So he was the most knowledgeable of them in the salat, so he would lead. He would lead the salat. Also, the Sahabi Muhammad bin Rabi', he mentions that he was Ibn Khamsu Sineen. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would consider him as mumayyiz. Shaykh Muhammad Salih Uthman mentions this. He was 5 years old and they considered him mumayyiz. So tamyiz is not only to 7, brothers. طيب, if he's not mumayyiz, could he join the saf, the rows? And some scholars say the one that doesn't have tamyiz, yaqta' as-saf. He breaks the rows. It's like a gap in the prayer. And some scholars say, لا, it's not considered to be قطع الصف لأن مسافته قصيرة. And the gap or whatever is there, it's small. So the correct opinion, it doesn't break it. Like right now, if he had a wall between him and his partner, or a chair, or an object that's blocking the gap, it's not considered to be an opening in the prayer. Same thing with a child being there. So there's no harm, inshallah. But there's a lot of fatwa with Ahlul Ilm that you shouldn't bring these children that are not mumayyiz to the salat if they're going to cause harm or disturbance. Fatwa Imam Malik and group of the ulama. People say, but the Prophet ﷺ brought some of his granddaughters, and that was a situation of need, and also they're under control. He was such under control to the point that he was distracted from his salat to keep an eye. But when your child is causing disturbance to others and they're affecting them, then that's not enough. You should keep them at home. That's the origin. وَدُخُولُ الْوَقْتِ, the entry of the prayer, or the timing. And they use the ayah as a proof. إِنَّ الصَّلَاةَ كَانَتْ عَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ كِتَابًا مَوْقُوتًا. Ibn Abbas says, مَفْرُوضًا. It's a time that is obliged timing. And the only exceptions they give to this prerequisite is a person combining between the prayers. The one combining between the prayers, he's allowed to pray at other than his timing. He has that concession. If he has a valid reason to combine. And also, for Jum'ah prayer, to pray out before Dhuhr timing comes in. You're allowed to pray Jum'ah prayer right before Dhuhr comes in. There's an exception as well. Even though, what about a person who forgets or sleeps on the prayer? Is that an exception to him? No, it's not an exception. That's his actual timing. That's dukhul al-waqt for him. فَوَقْتُهَا حِينَ يَذْكُرُهَا. His timing starts the moment he remembers or he wakes up. What's the last time of it? The last time of it is enough just to pray one salat before the time exits. طيب الطهارة. Tahara, because they use the wordings لا يقبل الله صلاة أحدكم إذا أحدث حتى يتوضأ. Allah doesn't accept the prayer of one of you if you break his wudu until he does wudu. واستقبال القبلة, and facing the qibla. Facing the qibla, some have said there's 4 exceptions where you're exempted not to face the qibla, and some say it's 3 exceptions. Who knows one exception? Voluntary prayer, mashallah. They say like if you're in a voluntary prayer, while some of them say with the condition, بالسفر. Safar, brothers. فإنه يصلي حيث توجهت به راحلته. طيب, where's the second exception? It's cloudy. Yeah, so they say in a person where he is jahil, like he's unaware of the qibla, and he has no other way except to strive according to his base of his capability. Here, if he exhausts all measures of his surroundings, and then he comes out to find out at the end of the prayer that he faced the other than the qibla, does he have to make it up? No. He did what is upon him. He did what was upon him. And the proof that they give for that is that those Sahabas that were still praying to Jerusalem, someone came and told them within the Salat that the Qibla has been changed. So they, in the middle of the Salat, they faced towards Mecca. Did they have to make up for the beginning of the prayer? No, they didn't. So they say if a person was ignorant and he exhausts all measures, he didn't fall short, but if he falls short, he has to make it up. But if he exhausted all measures, wajtahada, for example, there was no one around to ask, he didn't have no app, he tried every means in front of him, here he's exempted even if he prays to other than the qibla, because of those adillah. طيب, any other exception? We need 2 more, brothers. So altogether there's 4 exceptions to not facing the qibla. The next exception, if you are incapable, ajiz, like marid, or in prison, you're chained to a wall you can't face. So what do we do with it? Tell the person, because it's not upon you to pray salat. No, we just say here, you pray wherever you can. فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ لَا يُكَلِّفُ اللَّهُ نَفْسًا إِلَّا وُسْعَهَا إِذَا أَمَرْتُكُمْ بِأَمْرٍ فَأْتُوا مِنْهُ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ. So a marid, he prays according to his capability. So like, for example, if the hospital bed is too hard to move or it's hard to move the body, you don't come and you make a hardship on the person. Just let him pray how he is. No, we have to turn him. No, the bed is not suitable. We're going to make it worse for him. His illness, he's connected to things. Just leave it as it is. He's exempted. He has a concession. What's the last situation? في شدة الخوف. Like a person in severe fear. He's running from an enemy or an animal. What does he do? Or he's running from a flood. من سيل. He prays, فَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ فَرِجَالًا أَوْ رُكْبَانًا. If you fear, then you can pray on foot or riding. And we know in those situations, praying on foot or riding, a lot of times you're not facing the qibla. فَإِذَا أَمِنْتُمْ فَاذْكُرُوا اللَّهَ كَمَا عَلَّمَكُمْ وَلَمْ تَكُونُوا تَعْلَمُونَ. Those are the 4 exceptions with its proofs that you could face other than the Qibla. And your prayer will be valid. The next one is Satrul Awra. Satrul Awra, the Jamahir al-Ulama. Some of them even quoted al-Ijma', brothers. They say the Satrul Awra, concealing the Awra, is a condition, a prerequisite. Shaykh Albani says, من شروط صحة الصلاة لكن بعض المتأخرين كالشوكاني والصديق حسن خان وغيرهما يرون أنه فرض وليس بشرط. They see it to be wajib, but they don't see it to be a condition. Why do they say just wajib? Like they say, if his awra were to show, for example, we cannot say his prayer is batila, invalid. We just say he's in sin. He's in sin. But Shaykh Albani, he opposes this opinion and agrees with the vast majority. Shawkani, does Shawkani have other scholars that preceded them? We'll relay shortly, inshallah, this discussion. But from the ulama, contemporary ulama that agree with Shawkani, is Sheikh Muqbil, rahmatullahi alayh. And they have a lot of evidences. From the evidences, we'll read here, to support this opinion, is that young man who was 7 years old, Umar ibn Abi Salama, he would lead the salat, and sometimes some of his rear end would show when he would go into, because they would even have to teach him how to do ruku' and sujood. He was so young, they had to teach him. They said, we just need you to lead the salat. So they just brought him, and in the teaching him, at the very moment, the ruku' and sujood, it's not someone who knew how to pray. They needed him. They were so desperate to someone to lead them that much. Sometimes the people are forced to bring someone who doesn't even know how to pray properly to lead the salat. So they brought this newborn, and sometimes his awra would show. And also from what they use, the exact wording, they'll say, أَلَا تُغَطِّ عَنَّا إِسْتَبْنِكَ. Should you not cover the behind of your little boy, your young son, when leading us in the salat? And then when they mention another narration, that some of the Sahabas, they were عقد يعني أزرهم في عناقهم, and it got so tight that the women were told, يا معشر النساء لا ترفعن رؤوسكن حتى يرفع الرجال, because it was feared that the men's, how tight their izar were, that something of their awra would show. So accidentally. So it was told even the women, do not raise your heads before the men raise their heads. So showing that possibility didn't make their salat rendered as invalid. Going back to the discussion, who preceded from the earlier scholars to say that it's not a shart? Ibn Hajar al-Fath al-Bari, he says, the Jumhur went as ستر عورة من شروط الصلاة. وعن بعض المالكية التفرقة بين الذاكر والناسي. Someone who does it يعني knowingly or forgetfully. And then he says, وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ أَطْلَقَ كَوْنَهُ السُنَّةِ لَا يُبْطِلْ تَرْكَهَا الصَّلَاةِ. And from them, from the ulama, who see that is just a sunnah, meaning in their wordings, wajib, that if a person were to leave it off, his prayer is still valid. So this is where Shawkani inclines to. And that adds up. Because sometimes people are praying and some of their pants, with the tightness of their clothing, it shows their behind or something of that. Some scholars, they make an exception to small amounts. They say that. And some scholars take from this that those type of people, their prayer is valid. What about a woman? It comes a hadith, لا يقبل الله صلاة حائض إلا بخمار. Allah doesn't accept the prayer of a woman who reached the age of puberty except with a khimar. That hadith, Sheikh Mubil says, his correct opinion is mursal. Mustadrak al-Hakim, it's disconnected. But he says, if something of her body were to be shown, لا نستطيع نحكم على صلاتها بالبطلان. So some scholars say, for example, small portions of her hair were to show, her prayer is still valid. Some scholars, like Sheikh Albani, says if it's usual that she covers up and then accidentally some of her hair were to show in the salat, her prayer is valid. So if she's praying and some of her arms showed her prayer, he says we cannot say that her prayer is. Does she have to cover her feet? The safer stance is her to cover her feet. Because the narration that Salama, that we said from the statement of Salama, where she's giving a verdict. She's saying that the woman, she should pray with a covering that covers her feet, the surface of her feet, ظهور قدميها. Even though it's from her statement on the correct opinion, but she's the wife of the Prophet, brothers. And this is the safest for a woman to cover her feet when she's praying. Yes, a lot of scholars say it's allowed for a woman to pray with her face uncovered and her hands uncovered and her feet uncovered. But the safest is just the face and the hands uncovered. Try to cover her feet. What's our proof? That إِلَّا مَا ظَهَرَ مِنْهَا, that what they say, that which is regarding her face and her hands is the main, with the consensus, but not for her feet. Her feet is a big difference of opinion. To be on the safe side, she should cover it. طيب, subhanallah, time is running out. The next one, اجتناب النجاسة. We'll stop here. اجتناب النجاسة. Is that considered to be a condition? Some of the scholars, the majority, they say, وَثِيَابَكَ فَطَهِّرْ. It comes from the Quran that to keep your clothing, your place of where you're wearing and what's your surroundings, purified for the salat. So this is why they use it as a condition. But Shawkani, he says it's not a shart. It's just wajib. But Ibn Qudama says the majority of the ulama, and it's been attributed to Ibn Abbas, Sa'id ibn Musayyib, Qatada, Malik, Shafi'i, and Abu Hanifa and his companions, that they say it's a shart. Imam Shawkani says not. And what's their proof to show that it's not a prerequisite? They use the scenario where the Prophet ﷺ, when he once prayed and Jibreel came to inform him in the middle of the salat that there's something in his shoes. There's adha. So he took off his shoes in the salah, and the Sahabas followed him. So they said if it was a prerequisite, he would have to repeat his prayer from the beginning. Because remember we said, shurut salat is qabla salat, throughout the salat. Those are the two things that stand out of it. So that's been nullified now. Because it wasn't qabla salat, and it wasn't throughout the salat. There was a portion of the salat that was like that. But those scholars who still hold on to the opinion, they come and they say, no, this is in a scenario where it was unknowingly. When you do it unknowingly, you're exempted. So Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah says, for the safer stance, that is just a wajib. الإمام الشافعي من صلى وعلى ثوب نجاسة كان تاركا لواجب وأما أن تكون صلاته باطلة كما هو شأن فقدان شرط الصحة فلا. Okay, quickly side benefits, inshallah. The first side benefit, when we say the tamyiz, this, or some of them even add yani bulugh, because depending on what they add of shurut al-salat, some of them add of shurut al-wujub and shurut al-sihha. So they're saying shurut al-wujub, bulugh. It has to be reached the age of puberty. But they say rufi al-qalam an as-sabi, the pen has been lifted from the young boy from the angle of sayyi'at. The pen has been lifted from him from what? From what angle? From the angle of writing bad deeds, not from the angle of writing good deeds. Because it starts from the sin of tamyiz. Even some scholars even went further. They said it because the woman, she asked the son, Alahu yani hajj. Does my son have hajj? And the Prophet said, Naam wa laki ajr. And you have, yes, and you have a reward. So the child, if it does any good, it gets written for it. And they ascribe that to Umar al-Khattab, a narration. He says, تُكْتُبْ لِلصَّغِيرِ حَسَنَاتُهُ وَلَا تُكْتُبْ عَلَيْهِ سَيِّئَاتُهُ. It's written for him his good, but it's not written for him his bad. That's why we make them pray at a young age, and we make them fast, like the Sahabas used to make them fast, the children of Ashura, and get them distracted with certain things, even though it wasn't wajib on them. But you want the child to get good. So he gets the good that he does. People say, no, the parents get the good. No, the parents get the good for the ta'aleem, for teaching. عَلِّمُوا أَبْنَاءَكُمُ الصَّلَاةِ. You're just teaching, instructing. Shaykh bin Baz says, أعمال الصبي الذي لم يبلغ أجرها له هو لا لوالديه ولا لغيره. It's for him, not from his parents. But the parents, he says, gets the ta'aleem. Because the Prophet, the woman's asked, Allah hada hajj? He said, Naam wa laka ajr. Shows that he got hajj, the reward of hajj, that young boy. So it's good to get them to do good things at a young age. These are going to benefit them. He's getting a head start. He has hasanat already. He comes, mashallah, we tell him, brother, that something, maybe you did something when you were young. Hasanat. Allahum barak. Another quick benefit. Time is limited. So the quote that we brought from the Hanafis, يجيزون أن يكبر تكبيرة الإحرام في البيت ثم يأتي يصلي في المسجد. ما شاء الله. يجيزون له, because they say it doesn't have to be simultaneously together. You can say Allah Akbar and then come to the masjid and start praying. And some of them, they say the intention has to be with the takbir. But if you were to try to change his intention at the ending of the takbir, it wouldn't count. Some of them are saying this. Always mentioned, it doesn't have to be exactly simultaneously. And it doesn't go to another extreme as well of having a huge gap. So these are, it's in a nutshell, inshallah. There was a few other pointers. Like Sheikh Islam ibn Taymiyyah, he's on the opinion that يعفى أن يسير العورة قدرا أو زمانا فلو انكشف منها يسير وهو ما لا يفحشه في النظر في جميع الصلاة, and it's certain duration or small amounts, small temperatures, they are allowed. He sees that to be exception. We'll stop with this and then move on now to the other book. So next week will be the actual timings. We're going to get into the actual timings of the salat, and we'll try to break it down from a very detailed point of view so we can understand things, inshallah. So we're going to move on now to the book of, because the time is limited, probably take it later, inshallah.